Hamas and Fatah so close to a reconciliation deal, but now the two sides are further apart than ever after the Goldstone report fallout. So what does it mean for the future of Palestinian unity? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. Sacrificing peace for propaganda. That's the accusation being levelled at Palestinian leaders. The inter-Palestinian peace process has hit yet another stumbling block this week. A reconciliation agreement was supposed to be signed by the 25th of this month. It was intended to lead to cooperation between Fatah and Hamas over eventual elections and the reconstruction of war-damaged Gaza. But the Palestinian Authority, headed by Fatah leader Mahmoud Abbas, has decided not to back a UN-sponsored war crimes report into Israel's assault on the Gaza Strip. Hamas says the move amounts to a betrayal of the Palestinian people and has postponed the signing of the agreement in protest. Well, joining us today are our guests in Damascus, Munza Suleiman, who is director of the Center for American and Arab Studies in Washington. In Ramallah, we're joined by Mustafa Barghouti, Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative, and also in Ramallah, Abdul-sattar Qasim, Professor of Political Science at An-Najah National University in Nablus. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Mustafa Barghouti, if I may start with you. 1 step forwards, 10 steps backwards is all very familiar, isn't it?
Well, the authority did a big mistake, that's for sure, and not allowing this report to pass, and was perceived by majority of Palestinians as an unacceptable act. So there is a ground for this problem, and but at the same time, I think that particular decision reflected a situation, not only a trend, but also a situation of lack of accountability and a lack of leadership, at least joint leadership, collective leadership. And that should be a reason to go forward in reconciliation. In my opinion, the efforts are not over yet. There are now talks and discussions. We are part of these talks. I've been talking to the different parties this morning. And we are still hopeful that we can proceed with reconciliation, that this Goldstone thing should not prevent us from moving forward, because when we have a situation like this, we don't only miss unity, we don't only have lack of unity, we actually have lack of democracy and lack of accountability and lack of separation of power and lack of respect of human rights. And these things cannot be tolerated by the Palestinian people. And this division is hurting the future of all Palestinians. And it is best used and served and it is best used by Israel, which is abusing, actually, this issue. So the talks are going on now. We are hopeful that there will be a delay, of course, of the signing of a reconciliation agreement, maybe by a month or a little bit more, but that the reconciliation effort will continue, and there might be a signing by different groups of the agreement itself which we have reached. I think that agreement provides not only for democratic elections, which are very much needed next June, but also they provide for elections of members of the Palestinian National Council of the PLO, and thus open the road for the first time to elect a General Assembly of all Palestinians that could represent the interest of all Palestinians on the basis of democratic participation. And that, in my opinion, the best way of correcting any wrongdoing.
It all seems a very long way down the line, doesn't it? Mr. Qasim, it's true to say that all this infighting is getting nobody anywhere.
Well, yeah, it's not getting us anywhere, that's true. Now the problem, are we talking about reconciliation or about an accord? If we are talking about an accord, that's fine. Then all Palestinian factions and organizations should be in the meeting, and they should sign. And not only sign, but they must obligate themselves for implications or application. If they don't want to implement any kind of accord, then we don't need to go to Cairo. We have a bad experience with the organizations. We signed an accord in 2005 in Cairo, another in Mecca in 2007, and the implementation did not take place. Now, if we are talking about a reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas, well, that's fine. But first, we should have an investigating committee. Without investigation, who is responsible for the blood of the Palestinians that was shed over the last period. Then we should not try to have the organizations get away with that blood. There are people in all organizations responsible for the bloodshed, and they should be brought to court. They should be held responsible. Now, if we don't do the things right, then any kind of reconciliation or accord would not last long. Under the present conditions, I don't see that there are objective conditions or new conditions that promote the implementation of any kind of accord that we might reach. And as far as I understand, that the Egyptian text is again written in vague, ambiguous terms. Who would interpret these ambiguous and vague terms? Now, we might reach a reconciliation or an accord concerning these terms, but when it comes to details, things will come worse, and we will go back to the zero situation where we discover that we did not solve any of our problems.
Okay, I want to bring in Munza Suleiman in just a second, but first let's hear what Hamas leader Khalid Mashal had to say. He was pretty pointed in his criticism.
There will be no reconciliation without the rebuilding of the institutions of the PLO and of the Palestinian Authority based on the principles of democracy and free elections. And there will be no reconciliation made at the expense of the establishment of a national political decision-making mechanism. The Goldstone report has created such a strong wave of anger that made it impossible for us to go ahead with the reconciliation.
So, Munza Suleiman in Damascus, would you agree with Mustafa Barghouti that a big mistake was made by Mahmoud Abbas in not dealing with the Goldstone report?
It's not only a big mistake. This is a reflection of a trend that related to what Khalid Mashal was criticizing. The decision-making process in the Palestinian leadership. Now, Palestinian Authority or the PLO should take a crucial decision like this. And this is also about the kind of mechanism that to reach that decision. I think the problem will exist as long, even if they have reconciliation and they sign on papers, the Palestinian situation lacking the kind of authoritative decision-making process and a leadership that represent all points of view. It seems to me that there is a contradiction here between having national authority under occupation. The security branch of that national authority under occupation is serving the occupation needs and is in constant test to provide that is able to provide the security for the occupier. This situation going to explode between the factions again if there is no return to the foundation of the National Palestinian Liberation Movement and to have the kind of strategy about how to conduct negotiation based on what and how to conduct the struggle in general. And I think one important issue here is that the Palestinian Authority currently hijacked all institutions that the Palestinian people built throughout their struggle. So there is a need now for a decision about the role of this Palestine Authority. The Palestinian Authority, whether it's taking over all the institutions, taking over and taking the decision on behalf of everybody, or there should be a process, at least in the short-term period, until what Dr. Barghouti mentioned about reaching the agreement on election to provide an institution, the General Assembly, and the General Assembly that take into account all Palestinians everywhere that will be represented by a new leadership that could take a course of action that represent the will of the people, and it will stop all those division among the Palestinian and will carry on, because at some point you need to review this experience or experiment with the Palestinian Authority, whether it was for the good of the people or it was actually something not to their advantage or representing an advancement of their goals for national liberation in return. One last point I want to mention.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to mention that Khalid Mashal mentioned something very important. I heard his speech. He said that we agreed that we will accept a transitional state or state that only on the 1967 border. But the Israelis are refusing. So it seems to me when they accuse Hamas of being kind of extremist and not accepting a political process, there is many signs that Hamas provided for the political process to be advanced, but the other side did not agree, not to mention the issue of settlement and other issues.
Let me bring in abdul-sattar Qasim.
The United States is not able to do anything on.
Okay, Mr. Qasim, is Khalid Mashal actually daring a serious blow to the efforts of reconciliation by what he's saying?
No, I don't think so. Yani, all parties and the Palestinian, on the Palestinian level are playing a negative role, actually. It is not only that Hamas that's sticking to its own position. Now, you know, we have contradictory positions in Palestine. People, there is a kind of polarization among these contradictory attitudes. Now, if we talk about reconciliation, we need objective conditions for that. But these new objective conditions are not present. We are still living with the past objective conditions, that we are still living with Oslo Accords, with coordination on security bases with the Israelis, arresting Palestinians on both sides, torturing Palestinians on both sides. And also there is a very difficult problem concerning the financing the authorities in the West Bank and Gaza. Now, particularly in the West, they are telling us, together with Israel, that if there is an accord with Israel, with Hamas, that contradicts the Oslo Accords, then the Western countries, the donating countries, will stop financing the Palestinians. So how to blame Hamas only? It's Abbas and the PLO who started the first step in the very beginning. That's by signing the Oslo Accords. And we know if we come to the very sensitive questions concerning the basic national rights of the Palestinians, we should have a consensus. Now that consensus was not sought and was not reached by Arafat at that time. So he actually threw the seeds of bloody conflicts within Palestine, and these seeds are still working. They are still there. And even if, as I said, if we reach an accord now, I have so many doubts about implementing such an accord, because we are still in the basic principles that started the feuds on the Palestinian society.
Okay, well, let's talk more about that in just a second. But first, let's hear the words of Mahmoud Abbas himself. He accused Hamas, of course, of creating tensions between Gaza and Ramallah, between Hamas and Fatah. Let's hear what he had to say.
This campaign by Hamas is aimed at serving their interest, which is to postpone the signature of the reconciliation deal. They want to consecrate their rule in Gaza. They want to ensure the continuity of the division. They are serving a project that aims at weakening the National Palestinian Authority.
Things is all very well, Mustafa Barghouti, isn't it? You can see how Palestinians would feel let down by what's happened.
Yes, actually, yesterday people felt unhappy, and I was also sorry, because you see, these speeches somehow transformed the issue of Goldstone from being an issue between Palestinians and Israelis, and an issue where Palestinians are demanding justice because of the war crime that Israel has done. It became like an issue of internal Palestinian conflict, and that is the problem. That is a reflection of how much we need to get some form of unity between us. And let me be frank here. We have a leadership crisis here, and it's a serious crisis because there is a failing leadership. From one side, it is unable to achieve peace because Israel doesn't want to make peace, but its program to have peace is failing. Oslo is failing. On the other hand, it is unable to lead the struggle and provide Palestinians with an alternative form of struggle. You don't have to have either just negotiations and surrender to the other side or military struggle. There are other ways, and that is why it is important for your audience to understand that it is not just Fatah and Hamas. We are talking also about very important democratic third alternative that exists on the ground. You are talking about very important non-violent Palestinian popular struggle that is spreading everywhere and that is also accumulating very important international solidarity movement. That's where Goldstone report was very important. But then, let's be frank, the question of leadership, how do you change leadership or how do you improve leadership? There are only two ways, either violent way, which we refuse, or peaceful forms of alternation of leadership or alternation of power. And that's what Palestinians opted for, democracy, through democratic elections. The question is, if we have an agreement and an accord between us, and that is what we are trying very hard to achieve like we did before, once we have some sort of national unity government, will the world recognize it or not? Once we have elections again, will the results be respected or not? I think here there is a problem that is always ignored, and that there is a serious responsibility, first of Israel, then of the United States, and then of the international community, which failed to recognize the national unity government of Palestinians in 2007, and that represented at that time 90% of the Palestinian electorate. They failed to recognize it, they surrounded it, they besieged it, and it fell down, and then we had this division. Now the only way to go back to reason, and the only way to go back to some sort of consensus is to accept democratic elections. But again, this democratic election cannot happen unless there is freedom of speech, freedom of political organization, release of all political prisoners. And that's why we are working very hard to have this agreement. Okay. One last point.
Go ahead.
It is that, this is very last point. We have an authority, but the authority is not enough. The authority cannot substitute national liberation movement. And that's why what we need today, and the Goldstone issue has proven this again, what we need is some form of unified leadership that can lead the Palestinian struggle as long as we are occupied, oppressed, and struggling against a terrible apartheid system on the ground.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, let's have a quick look at why this reconciliation agreement had been considered so significant. There's been bitter dispute between Hamas and Fatah since Hamas won parliamentary elections back in 2006. After the elections, hundreds of Palestinians were killed in street fighting. And finally, Fatah joined a unity government with Hamas, but Palestinian President and Fatah leader Mahmoud Abbas dismissed the Hamas-led government in June 2007, when, of course, Hamas armed forces seized the Gaza Strip. And since then, Egypt has been trying to mediate to establish a power-sharing deal between the two. And many see a Palestinian agreement as crucial to the wider Arab-Israeli peace process, as we have now been discussing. Munzer Suleiman, no doubt about it, public opinion polls all suggest national unity is a massive priority, yet both sides are intent on fighting. You would agree, I guess, with Mustafa Barghouti that some kind of unified leadership is essential.
The issue is not only unified leadership. The issue is to provide leadership, represent the will of the Palestinian people, and also preserve their struggles, their achievement, and also affirming their national goals. There is a need to review, especially Oslo process, and reach, this is the Goldstone saga is the result of this kind of leadership and decision-making process. And also, you have to review the entire approach of negotiation and the basis of the negotiation. And this is the issue of how the international community should recognize, or international community will stop funding, etc. All Liberation National Movement did not wait for such approval for their own struggle. I think the struggle of the Palestinian is legitimate for their rights to return, to establish their own self-determination. So ultimately, a leadership should respond to the people's need. And I think the problem here, you have part of leadership that is controlling the decision-making process that truly is in contradiction with the will of the people. And there is a need to create a mechanism for that will of the people to be represented now, because the past experience provided us with a leadership that can reconcile with the occupation forces more than reconcile with other Palestinian faction. And I think the reconciliation could occur, call for unity could occur, but as long as this unity and this reconciliation is not based on maintaining the goals of the struggle of the Palestinian and preserve their rights, it's going to have, again, the similar problem going to occur again. So I think the problem now that there is no institution to go back to it.
Okay,
and
let me bring in
everybody is maneuvering, especially the Palestinian Authority
we're running out of
is
time, so I need to
maneuvering
bring in Mr.
to control
Qassim.
the result of the election by all kinds of means that outside and internally.
All right, Mr. Qassim, there's no doubt about it. The whole Goldstone issue is being used by both sides to try and gain some kind of political advantage, and while they both continue to do that, there is no hope of any progress.
Yeah, both of them apparently are opportunists. There are more serious and dangerous issues happening now in Palestine more than Goldstone. Like, for instance, it's very dangerous to have coordination with the Israelis on security bases. Now the Palestinians are defending the Israelis. This is the truth in Palestine. Then how would such a situation unify the Palestinians? Now, there are Palestinians who were led by an Israeli officer who killed a Palestinian in Hebron, who was labeled as the leader of Al-Qassam brigades in Hebron. Now, this is very dangerous and much more dangerous than Goldstone. So, Oslo has done so many things against the Palestinians that would never lead to unity as long as it is there. I understand that these Palestinian organizations behave like traditional Arab tribes. That's true. But if we remove or if we rethink the Oslo Accords and its ramifications, I think we will pave the way for a better understanding within the Palestinian society. Then we might reach a certain kind of unity that might not be solid, but at least will not lead to a certain kind of fighting.
Okay, I'm going to jump in there because we're running out of time. We've got about a minute left on this program. I just want to put this to Mustafa Barghouti. We've been seeing pictures there of George Mitchell, the Middle East envoy, in action. He's been flitting to and fro, as we know, across the Atlantic to try and get some sort of progress. The truth is there is no progress possible while Hamas and Fatah are in such disagreement and disaccord.
That's not the main reason. There is no progress because Israel is adamant about continuing settlement activities, about refusing the path of peace, about refusing to allow a Palestinian state.
But the Palestinians need to present a unified front,
decided. Of course, but the United States administration has not decided yet to pressure Israel. As long as they don't pressure Israel, even if we have the best unity in the world, there will be no progress in the peace process. That is the truth. And finally, I want just to disagree with my colleague Abdul-Sattar and my friend. Goldstone report is very important. It's a turning point. It's a turning point for humanity. It means to all these dictators and oppressors and military criminals that they cannot attack civilians and kill them and commit crimes against them without being accountable. This is a turning point for Palestinian struggle. I am sure this report, regardless of what happens in the UN, will become the cornerstone of a campaign of sanctions against Israel in support of the struggle of Palestinians against apartheid.
All right, it's been a very interesting discussion, gentlemen. Thanks very much indeed. We've run out of time. That's it. Thanks for your time. Munza Suleiman, Mustafa Barghouti, Abdul-Sattar Qassim. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you for watching this edition of Inside Story. As ever, we welcome your comments and your suggestions. Just drop us a line, email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From me, Nick Clark, it's goodbye.